and welcome to 5 Days Live, Day 2, with myself, Bridgetti Banda, and David Burrows. Hello, Bridgetti.
Hello, Stephen. Good to see you. And I'm so excited that we're already on day 2 of 5 Days Live.
Indeed, and Day 2 wouldn't be Day 2 without David Burrows, who actually suggested today's topic. Hello, David.
Hello, and Happy New Year 2019. I think we're still allowed to say that.
I think you are, yeah. And welcome to everybody who's watching the show. Now, today's topic is conducting awesome interviews, and as the suggestor of the topic, David, it's over to you. What are we talking about today?
Oh, wow. Well, I guess this is an important topic because I think there can be a lot of details that go into preparing an interview. And there's different levels, I guess, of interviews. Sometimes you might have what I call the wing it interview. And then you might have a little more scripted interview. I think a lot of it, pardon me, depends on who you're interviewing and who you're preparing for. And based on that, I think one of the things we have to keep in mind too is that most people aren't good at being interviewed. They're not used to the camera, especially in this setting. I get a lot of people I know when I try to set up an interview, they go, "Oh, could I just call you?" And it's like, no, I'm not a radio station. No, it's a video thing, so you have to, I guess what's called the pre-interview. And I would say the interview before the interview can be, some are easier than others. Some just go, yeah, just throw whatever you want at me and I'm good. Okay, great. But usually more people require, you got to make them feel comfortable. Have a little conversation with them, establish a relationship or rapport. You can make a new best friend in about 30 seconds if you know how to do it right. Yeah. So the pre-interview, I think, is one of the most, important elements of getting ready for the first interview. Bridgetti, your thoughts on that?
I totally agree with you. I don't think you can slip and slide into a casual interview with somebody who's done it before and they're comfortable and they're perhaps an accomplished speaker themselves, or it's with another live streamer. But if you're interviewing a guest who's never done this before, and if you don't make them feel comfortable, because it's an unknown factor for your guest. So you've got to really make sure that you
Right, hopefully, Barbara, you're now seeing somebody on screen. If you can, this is live video. This is day 2, and every single day this week we're going to have a little glitch at the beginning of the show. So I want to say, right, and I know there's a delay on the comments. Can you, if you can see me now, could you just say I can see you, and that will help solve this. I've got messages in the background from David, and I'm just going to say try again to David. This is live. And we're coming back. We'll be back on track in a minute. This is the thrill of life. Hello, Bridgetti.
Hello, everyone, for the second time.
Whoa, I'm back.
You know what? Tech can go wrong. No matter how much one prepares, things can and will go wrong. And just trust today that it does happen right at the beginning of the show. But here's a great tip, everyone. Tech can go wrong. Prepare for the fact that tech can go wrong. So when it happens, do not panic. The best thing you can do for yourself is to actually take a deep breath. And yes, take a deep breath and breathe in. Don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath. Take a deep breath and carry on. Thank you, Brad, for letting us know that we're good again, and we're all back.
There you go. I don't even know where we left off.
Yeah. Well, don't panic.
Bridgetti and I were talking about preparation for the show.
Yeah.
Sort of to get the introduction, you've got to do the prep. Now, if we take it that you're actually interviewing somebody you've not met before, what approach would you take, David?
Yeah. Well, I mean, before the day of, obviously, I usually try to book for my community show anyway. I try to book a week in advance at least. You can do more than that, but I do it that way just because of timing. You never know what's going to be happening in the community kind of thing. But again, that relationship and rapport first, and making people feel comfortable. I have like a note that I send out in an agenda. I have 3 guests, say for example, on my show every week. Because it's a full hour. So I send them an agenda. I say, here's the link. And I go through, this is how you do it on Chrome. This is how you do it if you're going to do it on an app. And I invite them to call me or text me or whatever, do a test. And very detailed instructions. And then oftentimes, too, if it's somebody I've never interviewed before, a phone call, an old-fashioned phone call. You know, to just say, hi, how's it going? Did you receive my message? Because sometimes I find with this texting world, I'll send people a message or Facebook them the message, and you can see that they've seen it, but they don't reply.
That never happens. I've never known an instance where I've sent out a message to 2 different people and not going there.
And you know, when you send that, I mean, I find sometimes too, even when you send that information, people go, "Oh, I got to do all this for a lousy interview." You know, like I got to go through all these steps. I had one yesterday, actually. It came up last minute, and the technical side of it can sometimes be frustrating. It's like, "Oh, I'm here and I was ready, but I don't have the access code yet for the Wi-Fi here in the building." It's like, sometimes those things come up last minute, and you have to be able to just say, "Relax. I'll walk you through it." And I ended up, walking them through it over the phone. And then I was like, I'm live in 30 seconds. Look, I was scheduled to go live at a certain time. When you schedule it, you have 10 minutes by Facebook before the Facebook defaults and kicks you off. If it's not radio, take an extra minute or 2 if you have to get through it, and learn to multitask. I guess is a part of that.
What?
Learn to multitask. Yeah, and it's tough for us guys. I know.
No. What I wish is it would be great if everybody had a wiki. Now, if you were,
what?
I'll rephrase that. If you're interviewing somebody who's well known, then you can go to Wikipedia. You can find out all about them. Okay. If you're interviewing let's talk about our current circle at the moment. Then in order to find out about them, you've got to go to their Facebook page. And if they've written something there, you can make a note of that. You can put it into Trello. If they have a web page, you can take notes from Trello from there and put those into Trello. If they're on LinkedIn, you can actually get a decent photo. LinkedIn is the place for decent photos because people on Facebook tend to change the photo. It's the business one you want, isn't it, most of the time, rather
Correct.
than the personal one. Yeah.
Well, it's a good point you talk about there too, as far as so let's say somebody really well known, like myself. I've interviewed a lot of musicians, well known.
Yeah.
They often have a publicist, and you need to go through the publicist to get the interview. And then once you do, everyone's different. They have these guidelines for an interview, questions not to ask or what to ask. Some are shaped for you. And then other ones are just like, yeah, he's pretty casual. Just ask him whatever you want. Just don't ask him about money. Don't ask him about money or who his favorite musician is. Certain things like that. So, it depends on what the level of. I'm pretty fortunate with my weekly show because a lot of times it's different local agencies, and like every couple of months, I'm likely having them back again. So I'm actually in the process of. I've trained my guests on how to use this BeLive thing, how to use it from an iPad or a phone, or in this situation. So now that those are repeating and they're getting used to this way of doing an interview, it used to be go into the local radio station and sit in a room. And this is, a lot different than that. So I just think it's, get your own system on what you think works. I know what works for me. Bridgetti works we all have different, but I do think it's important to go through a step-by-step technical on how to do this, but the old-fashioned phone call, whatever you got to do to help them understand the importance of a strong internet connection, and even explaining if you disappear or something happens, teach them how to what's the refresh button. That's important, right? Because as we just saw here, It got us through it, right? And how to go. Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is find your way that works for you, but make your guests comfortable with the technology and make them comfortable being in front of the camera. And it takes a little effort to do that if it's someone who's never done this kind of thing before. And by doing it and doing it properly, you can make a best friend for life. Think about that for a minute. A best friend for life doing the interview.
Absolutely. And most times you'll find that if things have gone really well, you've done your preparation, you've presented your guest well, they feel comfortable. More often than not, you're going to have them back a second, a third, a fourth time because you've made them enjoy the experience so much. I've seen situations where people have never been on camera before and, they've never done a live stream before and they're absolutely petrified. But once they were on the live stream, they felt so comfortable. They felt like they were in a studio with me and I made them feel good. At the end of that interview, and I said to them, "Will you come back?" The answer is always yes, because they enjoyed the experience. So it's all about how you make your guest feel. And then the other thing.
Go ahead.
The other thing that after you've done the small talk, because that's a very crucial part of the process is the small talk, because if you don't get the small talk right, you're never going to get to the meaty part and be successful at that. And so for me, one of the key tips in even making that transition and having a successful interview is being a great listener. If you can listen to in other words, you need to be familiar with your own tech stuff. You need to have that down pat so that you're not focused entirely on just the tech and that you're not tuned into, you've got to make eye contact with your guest, listen to them very, very carefully so that you don't miss a beat. Make sure that you're staying on topic, that you guide the conversation, but be a good listener above all, I think is one of the best advices I could give to anyone to conducting a successful interview.
Yeah, and it's important because, well, I know, again, back to multitasking, it can be difficult to listen sometimes if your guest is talking and you're trying to, type something into the agenda to show on the screen, or you've got a technical issue with your next guest that's coming up and you're trying to walk them through on Facebook Messenger while you're listening and that sort of thing. So, and I always tell, one of the things I do tell my guests, and you made me think of this, Bridgetti, by saying making eye contact with your guest is important. Sometimes it's if I'm preparing the next guest to come on because they're having a technical issue, I always tell my guests, look, I'm producing the show and I have other things to do. If I'm not looking right at you or I'm looking away at a screen or something, I am listening. Don't think I tell them I am listening. I don't want you to think that I'm not paying attention to you. It usually means I've got you in full screen mode. If I have to do something, I put them in full screen mode so that the audience doesn't see me looking away and doing what I got, like, what, I got to do this.
David, you full screen.
This guy, right? And this guy isn't even paying attention to the person he's interviewing, right? So that's an important listening factor.
Okay, a question then: who's most important, the host of the show or the guest?
Oh, definitely the host. Always the host.
Right, there are two possible answers to this, and one of them's right, and one of them's not so right.
Well, your guest is obviously first and foremost in the conversation. However, there are points where the focus goes on the host, and the reason might be, I mean, I've interviewed people where you say, so blah, 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 and they go, yep. They give you like this one word answer, and you're like, okay, so it's up to you, the host, and that's when the focus is back on you then to, okay, we gotta lead to the next question and get them moving along. And honestly, that comes from making that happen comes from the pre-interview. Saying this is, we just don't be just, I say, we're just having a conversation. Nobody's watching. It's just you and me. If we met for the first time, and I find once you get them talking about their thing that they're passionate about, if you get them talking about their passion, it's pretty easy. People love to talk about their passion. And it's like a pulley. It's really hard in the beginning to get it going. But once you get the momentum going and it flows, it's a lot easier to keep it going, right? So that's, if that makes sense. But it's definitely the person you're interviewing. It's got to be number one.
Then the other thing I'd like to focus on in conducting a good interview ties into your homework. Have questions that are relevant. Have questions. Don't ask questions that's going to blindside your guest or make them feel uncomfortable. Obviously it depends on what the show is about, but generally speaking, you want to ask questions that's not going to take them out of their comfort zone, right. Because they're not going to enjoy the experience. Yeah. It's not the kind of thing I think that we generally do in live streaming. We generally want to make people look good and feel good about the online experience. So know the topic. You don't have to be an expert on the topic, but you need to know a little bit about the topic so that you can ask intelligent questions. You don't want people going around and saying, what was this guy thinking? He didn't ask questions that pertained to the topic or to the guest. So make sure that you're on point with your preparation for the guest.
Yeah, I like to sort of refer to it sometimes as a professional coffee shop conversation. If I'm sitting with you in a coffee shop and you're talking to me about your thing, whatever that is, be genuine too. It's like, okay, so you're telling me about this agency, you do this, and it does. So if somebody wanted to find out about that, like how would I, or what exactly does that look like? Or the questions have to be nice and simple. If you're interviewing people, yeah, you're right. You don't want to get too personal on like, so you wrote this hit song. So how much money have you made off that song?
Yeah, there are no questions.
It's none of your business. What do you mean?
But how do you actually decide on the guest? How do you decide which guests you're going to have?
Well, Bridgetti, you go ahead with that one.
Well, it depends on what the show is all about. You know, very often I will come across someone and I know that they're an expert on the topic, for example, and I'll approach them and say, look, you know, I really think that you will add value to my audience because this is your area of expertise. And would you mind sharing? And generally speaking, people love the opportunity to share something that they're an expert on. You know, why wouldn't they? Anything that makes them look good. So, yeah,
it certainly depends on the theme.
I've ever really had. Yes, it does depend on the theme of the show. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate because the community show that I do, well, that just kind of says it right there, right? It's for that show that I do is local and community oriented. So there's no negative. I don't really do news on the show. So you know, it's a lot of you know, nonprofit organizations, charitable organizations, local musicians. And feel good stories, quite honestly too. I my ears are always open when I'm out and about and around other people. Even if I overhear it in a coffee shop when they're sitting there by themselves, I might even say like, "Pardon me, I wasn't eavesdropping, but I kind of was." And I really was enjoying your story. Yeah. Would you be interested in telling me more about it? Oh well, you know what? Tell me more about you. Everybody loves to talk about what they're doing, especially when somebody asks. You know, it's it's butterflies in the tummy. You know, oh, somebody's interested in me, and I think that leads into the interview side of thing as well. Again, is make it about them. I do my research, and I don't say I play dumb, although I'm pretty good at it sometimes. But sometimes not knowing everything about them is better because then when I'm asking questions, I'm really genuinely saying like, oh, well, that's interesting. Well, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because you know, how somebody might, it just all leads one to another, right? But you might not want some guests on your show.
So what sort of guests would you not want?
Happen.
Well, I just like, you know, Stephen, it doesn't happen too often, but like I said, I don't do negative. I don't do drama. I don't, you know, we don't need any F-bombs here. You know, we don't need like, and some people, they just don't get it, folks. And if they just don't get it, if you're not feeling a good vibe with them and you're not feeling if you feel like you have to make it work on your show, it's probably not the right choice. It's kind of like dating someone that you really don't like. You know, why would you do that?
I've had one such experience in 2 years. I had this person on the show and he decided that he wanted to make the show just about him. I mean, the show was mainly about interacting with the audience and making it informative for the audience. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so I started with the usual kind of small talk and trying to give him background as to what it is the audience is looking for. And basically he went blah, 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 blah. I'm not interested in what people want. This is my story and you're going to hear what I have to say. You know, and he was pretty bombastic and rude. And I ended the interview with him and I subsequently blocked him and I will never have him back on a show ever. But that was a once-off experience.
Yeah.
It never happened again.
Yeah. It doesn't happen too often, but I think it doesn't happen really to me. And one of the reasons is probably because I've been doing it for so many years now, that I've created this ambiance around me, that this is what's around David Burrows. That's what he doesn't, like I'm not Howard Stern, right? So you are what you are is what you attract, right? So, I mean, if you're doing a show on politics, you're going to have a lot of people talking to you about who to vote for, right? So, but
there are certain topics as well which you wouldn't broach. I mean, at the moment, if I mention the word Brexit, then as a topic of a show, then I get two tribes literally going to war.
People start throwing stuff.
Yeah, I know. There are topics that you don't actually go for. Anyway, thank you. I just had this idea, as we're actually in a show and we're talking about interviews. Why don't we take a moment just to interview each other?
Oh boy.
Okay, now I'll tell you what I mean, and then you can decide where to go with it. The three questions are who, what, and how. Okay. So, who are you? Tell us a bit about your background. Yeah. What do you do, and how did you get involved in it? And the third question is, how can you help people? And those three questions you can structure an interview around. So, who wants to go first?
Bridgetti does.
That's unfair. Okay.
She told me that before the show started.
Okay.
So I want to go first.
Yes, I did. We connived and we decided, if Stephen decides to do this, then I will.
My mother taught me ladies first.
Okay. Well, we'll take the questions in turn, David. How's that?
You're the boss. You're the interviewer.
I'm just the producer. No. Right. Bridgetti, welcome to the show. Could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really do appreciate the opportunity to be a guest. I have been live streaming for the last 2 years, and I want to say that I almost started my journey as a live streamer accidentally. I have a chronic back problem, and I live with chronic pain, and I needed to find a way to help people because that's always been my passion. All my life, I have been passionate about helping people. But because I now found myself in a situation where I was dealing with chronic pain and it was very debilitating, I had neck surgery and I needed to find an outlet. And I found that live streaming gave me the ability to continue to help people, but it was something that was stimulating and interesting for me at the same time. So my favorite phrase is always to say that live streaming saved me from myself. And that's why I love live streaming and I love being a talk show host.
And when did you get involved in live streaming?
I got involved in live streaming accidentally in Blab days. If anybody knows, I think most people watching the show today knows about Blab. And I was very disappointed when Blab came to an abrupt halt. And I missed it. And when Facebook Live became available, I jumped at the opportunity. And of course, no sooner did I hear about Be Live. And of course, like everyone else, I jumped in with both feet, learned how to use it. And again, opportunity came along. I was wondering what to live stream about. And then along came the Cape Town water crisis. And I thought, wow, I can really help people with this because now I've got this amazing tool with which I can create awareness, not only in my local community, but I can use this to create global awareness. Which I did. I was absolutely amazed because out of my live streaming, I was contacted by traditional media, both radio and television, local and international. And I suddenly found people contacting me to be interviewed on an ongoing basis over a period of about a year and a half at the height of the Cape Town water crisis. And I've made some awesome connections with people worldwide, and it's something that I will continue doing for a long time, because awareness of water is something that we will need to do. I mean, climate change is real, whether we believe it or not. So it's not something that's going to go away anytime soon. So that has been my first passion, and around which I built my live streaming career. Since then, I've branched out, but that will always be my first love in terms of live streaming, I think.
Now, one of the things you want to avoid in any live broadcast is what we call this situation where it's gone totally quiet, because David doesn't know whether I'm asking the next question. I don't know whether David's asking it, and we come quiet. But just for a moment, just take a slight break from what we're doing. We're actually testing something new today. In fact, I've written it down. We're testing something today on this show, and we spoke about it before the show. If you are watching the show on the Be Live in 5 page and you make a comment there, something magical will happen. So if you're on the Be Live in 5 page, it will tell you at the top where you are. If you just say hello, please do that, and you should find yourself then with us here. You understand what I mean if you just type hello. That's it, right? Okay. Now, the thing about the lesson from, you can interview me in a moment, but the lesson from that is, first of all, as hosts, we know that we're not going to say yes or no to any question. We have an answer, and we've used it many a times, and that was a great insight into, Bridgetti, why you're broadcasting, what type of broadcast you run, what causes, everything. We got information from you that we wouldn't get from I'm going to say a normal guest, because you're actually involved in broadcasting. But I think that the key question is, who are you and what is your background, is one that gets things underway. So question to David is, David, you want to ask me?
I didn't know. Yeah, like I didn't know if you were interviewing her and then interviewing me, or so the important thing is communication.
Right. And
so you want me to? I'm interviewing. Tell me what I'm doing, Stephen. Am I interviewing you? Are you?
Would you ask me that question?
Who are you? Tell us about your background. Okay, that was boring. So don't be like that. I was giving an example, right? All right.
Yes. You don't want to be staid or robotic or anything. You want to be natural and flowing when you ask the question. But that was my question, so it's understandable. Okay, so, my turn.
Am I asking you?
That's a very good point there. I want to emphasize that point, David. That's a really, really good point. Don't sound scripted, because believe it or not, the audience will know that.
That's right.
Don't sound like you're reading your questions.
Don't.
So, Stephen, are you asking me or am I asking you?
David, you can ask me.
Okay.
But you've already done that, so I'll go to me. Okay. Right. I got into broadcasting.
And have fun, ladies and gentlemen. Whatever you're doing, have fun.
Don't talk over your guest ever. Let them. You do know that you're not on screen, David. I'm producing the shows. Right. Okay. I got involved in broadcasting 3 years ago with Blab, as Bridgetti did, and we started a show over there called Blabbing for Britain. And we started with John Lutz and myself. We're joined by Peter Stewart and by Stephen Silk. And the four of us have been broadcasting this week for 159 weeks, almost continuous. That's over 3 years of broadcasting. And that's the backbone of what I've done with live broadcasting. I interview people, I listen to people, I create shows, I create ideas. I'm very fortunate to have built up a network of people around the globe who have just become good friends. And two of them are sat next to me. I'll just change the screen layout. I sat next to me today. I'm going back full screen now. My background is varied. I started off as an accountant and was almost certified, but that's another story. And was an accountant in Lancashire in England, going around companies and doing the annual audit, preparing the accounts, that led me into commerce and industry. And then I was working for a travel agent and I discovered computers. And this is when computers were first coming out. We went down to London, bought a computer, brought it back to the office in Blackburn, and it had no software. So I designed my first ever program at that time, which was for travel agents to take bookings. And we sold that to another company. I moved with the sale. And then having done that, I got totally into software. I left accountancy behind, got involved in software. I still do software, but my main love at the moment is broadcasting. Thank you for your question, David.
You're welcome.
Now, well, I learned something about you today. I knew that you were into software, but I didn't know about the accounting bit. So I've learned something new about you today too.
Excellent. Yep. Debit and credit. Debit's always nearest the window, so I'm told. Right. Are you going to ask David a question, Bridgetti? This is the question.
Okay. David, welcome to the show. So glad to have you today as a guest. Tell us, what do you do, and what do you love most about what you do?
Oh, well, that's a great question. And first of all, thanks for having me here on the show today. I appreciate that. What do I do? So sometimes that's a difficult question to answer because I do a lot of different things that all ties into one. But just to help you understand, I'll give you a little background on myself. So I was a professional DJ, wedding DJ, and a karaoke host, full-time career for 20 plus years was what I did. So I was involved in the entertainment world behind the scenes with a lot of musicians locally and around the province. And then life changed for me one day. I was involved in the bar business for a little while as well. And life changed for me one day. And I was like, what's this video thing, whatever. And, I just was kind of forced to make some decisions about my life and what I was going to do. So I took the skills I knew I had and discovered the live streaming world. And then it just kind of progressed to me into where it is now. And what do I do? I MC a lot of events. I guess you could call me a professional host. I do some videography work. And mostly what I do is a full-time live streamer, doing talk shows here on Facebook, locally promoting my community. And I do an international talk show host with a gentleman, Stephen Healey. And then I'm also a full-time streamer on Twitch as well. And as of today, I am a teacher at our local college here, teaching live streaming, broadcasting, and that sort of thing. So that's what I do. I know
Congratulations.
the long version, but that's what I do.
And what aspect of what you do you enjoy the most? Because there's lots of aspects to it, but what part do you enjoy the most?
There's definitely, you're right. There's a lot of things that I really enjoy about it, but I've always been a people person. I've always enjoyed people. I've always enjoyed their stories. And, it used to be over learning about people at a coffee shop or, having a beer. Now I've been able to take my resources and the people that I know and get to know more about people locally in my community. But I've often said that the planet is now one big city, and I've made a lot of friends all over the planet. I've been able to, when I'm traveling, stop and meet them in person and create relationships. So the people and the relationships it's really endearing to me to learn from people.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. It's always nice to get to hear someone's backstory, because generally speaking, when you're live streaming, the shoe's on the other foot and you're interviewing other people. So we don't always get to hear each other's backstories.
Yeah.
So thanks very much. I think that was an excellent suggestion, Stephen. I know you kind of just threw caution to the wind and but it was a great way of putting people on the spot nicely.
You know what I liked about that example was often as the person doing the interview. See, I found that a little awkward, and the reason I've been interviewed several times about me and what I'm doing on local newspapers and stuff, and it's like when I'm the one being interviewed, it's so different. And you're like, oh, I'm not here to talk about me. I don't want to talk about me. It's my passion, and I like to share what I'm doing. But I don't like this me thing. Some people would argue that. But truthfully, I found it weird. But it's a good experience to have because you really got to try and put yourself in the position of the person being interviewed, because we've heard it said oftentimes, people won't remember a lot of things that you say, but they will remember how you made them feel. And you really gotta and they'll never forget that. To give examples, some interviews that I have done, some young folks that have now grown over the years have reached out to me and said, I'm away at college now and I'm taking this course, and you're one of the reasons that I was inspired to stay positive and do what I'm doing, and and then I've been invited to their wedding, and it's like, wow, to have an impact. Impact is a big thing to remember when interviewing somebody. What's the impact that you're going to leave with them, making them feel? It's not just an interview. It's that 15 minutes or however long you're interviewing that person can really be impactful for the long term. And Stephen, I'm not sure if I'm off track here, but to follow up with that, is follow up is a big important part of the interview. I always follow up when the show's over. I send them a message saying, thank you so much for your time. Because you got to remember, a lot of these people are busy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And, for them to take 15 minutes of an interview, it's really about an hour of their time. By the time you do the pre-interview and you prepare them technically, they do the interview, blah, blah, blah. It's an hour of their time. That's a big ask for some people out of their day.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for being a part of my show. You're welcome back anytime. If there's anything else you would like me to, this is just my show in the way it's laid out. If it's not always an interview, please feel free to send me information about upcoming events, and I'll definitely at least mention it on the show for you. And that makes people feel appreciated.
Absolutely. Another thing I'd like to segue into in terms of hosting a good talk show is introducing your guest and yourself, so that the audience knows who you're talking to, the audience knows who you are, and the audience know what your subject's about, especially in terms of live streaming, because people seldom, unless you've got a very, very great topic that will hook them from beginning to end, a compelling story or a compelling guest that will have people stay for the entire duration of your live stream, especially if it's an hour long, for example. You want to make sure that on a continuous basis throughout your live stream, you want to make sure that, I am Bridgetti and Banda. My guest today is David Burrows, and David is a talk show host, and we're talking about live streaming today. You want to kind of weave that in continuously so that anyone joining the live stream at any point knows who you are, what you're talking about, and what your guest is talking about. That's just something I feel that is important to being a good talk show host as well.
Yeah, agreed for sure.
It's a great point, because if people are watching a television show, they can go to a synopsis of the show whilst they're watching it, and they can find out what the show's about. When you're watching a live video, you've got the text at the top, but it's good to actually remind people during the show of the show's title and of the people involved in the show, because we do get people who just seeing us for the first time and they want to be able to put a name to the face. So showing names on screen is something that we can do. And what we actually want to do is to reach out to people and get them involved as well, don't we? I mean, this is even an interview situation where it's one-on-one or two-on-one. You actually want interaction with your audience.
You make a great point there, Stephen, because people don't necessarily come in from the start of our live streams, and they don't always stay. They might come in and out and back and forth. And here's people don't read. They don't, like you could walk through a building and a sign says, no food beyond this point, and people still take food beyond that point because they don't read. And I find that they're just not they're not reading the whole description of who's on the show today.
Right.
Chances are they saw you go live. They went, oh, I've seen Stephen's show before, and he's always got interesting, cool tips on live streaming, so I'm going to stop and click on that. They don't stop and read the description. Still put the description in there anyway. Don't get me wrong. Some people do, but I find most don't. So to back to Stephen's point of saying, put the title back up again. If for me, again, 3 guests on a show, here, it's not just their name. It's Dave Brown from United Way of Sarnia Lambton, or it's Tina from, St. Clair Child and Youth Service, whatever that looks like. And it gives recognition to the person you're talking to as well, because they see you putting those things up. And when they see you putting up their website or their title of what they're representing, it shows some activity from you, and it just shows professionalism too.
Right, absolutely. And it's one of the things that I think we all like about BeLive, the fact that it's so easy to highlight something about your guests, show their names, recognize them. And I think that's a nice way to segue into, you were talking about audience participation as well. The audience love the recognition when you put their comments on screen, because it acknowledges them. It's a way to engage with your audience and make them feel connected. And the same way in which you will want to engage with your guest, you also want to engage with your audience, because that usually is part of it. So it's an engagement not only with your guests, but also with people watching the show, because that's the whole idea of live streaming, is to have an interactive audience. And you want to encourage that interaction by making them feel acknowledged and part of the show. And the other tip that I would like to leave with everyone is you need to decide before your show, are you going to have that interaction throughout your show, or are you going to leave a section at the end of the show, say, for example, the last 10 minutes? But be upfront about that so that your audience knows that you're not ignoring them through the show. And remind people and say, for the last 10 minutes, we're going to be looking at the comments and then taking your questions and answering them. So it's either one of the two styles. You either do it throughout or you do it at the end.
Yeah, and Andre is making a great point. We get a chance to make our audience members of our audience stars of the show.
Absolutely. Think of it sort of like a shout out on the radio, right? People, as they're so popular, they're like, hey, today I'm going to give a shout out to blah, 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 blah. And they hear their name on the radio and they go, I heard your name on the radio. Or television. If Jay Leno or whoever was doing a talk show and said, hey, shout out to Stephen Healey, you go, hey.
People love that.
I'm kind of special, right?
Oh, yeah. We're all, that's the thing.
Feel.
Treat your guests as special, treat your audience as special, and get everybody involved. And when somebody makes a comment which is pertinent to what you're talking about, then display it on the screen and mention them. And in that vein, Chuck has commented, live streaming by yourself seems harder to keep content interesting and work all the buttons. Two comments there. One, we all broadcast solo. And we know that it can be a challenge to actually come up with a topic, but the opportunities to actually co-host a show or to interview people are legion. There's so many different ways of doing it, and so many people to get involved. I've just gone to the BeLivers group, and the BeLivers group currently has, just to mention BeLive.tv for a moment, the BeLivers group currently has 8,543 members.
Nice.
And they would all like to be interviewed, Chuck. So, and talk about themselves. So
Yeah.
if you want to broaden your horizons and go into the interview arena, we've all got the skill set because we broadcast solo, so we can keep the show going. But if you want to hear about other people's experiences, just post in the Belivers group, say what the general topic of your show is, and invite people to join you, say when the show is, and say, right, okay, if you'd like to join me next Tuesday, 10 a.m. Eastern, and that gets the ball rolling, doesn't it?
And you might need to do that once a week in the Belivers group, because I've done it, looking for guests, blah, blah, blah. If you have a good story, reach out to me. They don't always see it. So if you subtly once a week, just, you don't want to be spammy or anything, but it's okay to ask more than once. Or I will go as far, and I haven't done it lately, but I will go as far as to, see something or somebody and I go, oh, and they seem interesting. And even if they're not friended to me, I'll send them a private message and I'll say, hey, I saw you in the Belivers group. Recognize where you saw them from so they don't feel creeped out. I saw you in the Belivers group and I saw your story about chronic back pain, and I was really intrigued by that, and I wondered if we could connect and you could tell me more and possibly be a guest on my show. Wait for the answer. And if they don't answer, move on to the next one. Right.
And there will be answers, because the thing, we don't talk about ourselves on our own shows, but we loved going on other people's shows and talking about what we're doing, how we can help people.
Yeah. Now, that being said, there are some shows that, you do just a solo show. Sometimes people talking, about music or politics or whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
When you're doing that, though, you do it as though you are having a conversation with somebody, a coffee shop, right? And talking to your audience. I was out the other day and I saw a young man helping, little old lady was having trouble with her groceries, and the young man went up and held the door for her and then got the groceries over to her car and put that in. And boy, I thought that was really great. Have any of you experienced that? So you have sort of the conversation real quick and then ask the question and just put it out there. You never know who's watching. And even if the number says 0 on the broadcast viewer button there, talk like you're talking to a whole bunch of people. Somebody will show up and they will respond to that. And that's kind of how you can do the solo act.
And we'll do
absolutely. And speaking of that, one thing I have an absolute pet hate about is when I'm going onto someone's live stream and I'm waiting for the topic to start, and the person says, well, there's not enough people here yet, so we'll just wait for another 5 or 10 minutes for some more people to show up, and then I'll start talking about the topic. There's nothing that'll get me out of there any faster.
Yeah.
Because you need to respect people's time. And you don't give them the necessary respect when you ask people to wait until more people come. And here's the thing, though, if you do that, you're doing huge damage to your replay. Mm-hmm. You do not want to do that, because imagine somebody watching the replay and they hear you saying, well, we're waiting for more people to come. It's not a good introduction to somebody watching the replay.
Yeah. I see Robert's got a nice comment up there, Stephen.
Yeah, if you've not done interviews yet, practice with your family members and friends. And just along the lines of what Bridgetti was saying a moment ago, one of my pet hates is countdowns, which perform the same service as saying I'm going live in 3 minutes. And if you're watching the replay, it means you've got an extra button to press. You either sit there for 3 minutes and wait for the countdown, or Right. But, okay, to sum up then, I'll go me first just for a change. The thing I love about doing live interviews is the people that I meet and get to know over the years who become friends. It is a great way to learn about things, really, because the people we bring on our shows all have different expertise to our own, and we can get to know things firsthand and make a new friend, and that conversation can continue basically for the rest of our lives. So interviews is a way of meeting people, introducing them to your audience, and also learning at the same time. Over to you, Bridgetti.
Well, I have to say that I have also enjoyed my live streaming tremendously. I have made so many new connections and friends. I don't even want to call people connections because it's way beyond that. Every single person that I've had on as a guest, every single co-host that I've had, every single person that I've interviewed, I have been able to create a rapport with them and a real friendship. And I value that. I really, really do. It's something that you cannot substitute for anything else. It is, for me, it's simply been an amazing journey so far, and one I wouldn't like to end anytime soon, because I really am having so much fun online. And so much so that I often feel like a fish out of water when I'm not live streaming, because it really feels good to be in front of the camera and be able to talk to people. But more than that, it's being able to help other people that gives me a great sense of joy.
David.
Well, we talked about a lot of things there, so I hope people have taken some notes and or come back and watch the replay again, because it's still going to be available, which is great. Definitely, there's work involved in preparing an interview. So, take the time, and the time that you put into preparing for your interviews and preparing your guest for the interviews, and learning and working on some skills to make it flow perfectly, which it will never flow perfectly, but you can come really close. Just have fun. Just enjoy yourself when you're doing it. Be genuine with the people you're interviewing when you ask a question. Don't ask a question just because you need to ask a question. If you're not genuinely interested in your guest, I recommend not interviewing them. That's what I would say. And create relationships. Take it as an opportunity to create those relationships. And even in the beginning, when I say make a new best friend, and you can do that in 30 seconds. And I don't mean best friend for life necessarily. I mean, you can make a friend in 30 seconds if you do it properly. Create relationships, have fun, be prepared for a few things to go wrong. It's okay if it does. It's fine. Stephen is still here. Nothing blew up or anything, right? So it's okay. And just enjoy yourself. And thank you all for watching. And Stephen, props to you for taking the time to put this all together again, and organizing and dealing with all us different personalities, for being here today.
Well,
Thank you, Bridgetti and David, for being here today.
I want to ditto that, David. Stephen, thank you so much. To everybody watching, Stephen has been the backbone of 5 Days Live, and he puts in a lot of effort, a lot of time for us to be able to take part in 5 Days Live. We have a lot of fun. It's a great journey. And I want to say thank you to all of you for watching and sharing.
Right, now, ordinarily, this would be the end of the show, and it will be the end of the show on Facebook, but there's an after show on Twitch, and we'll be relaxed there because we'll talk about anything and everything. You can join us on camera, and just click that link, and we'll be there in about 5 minutes, and we'd love to talk to you. Now, the other thing we want to do is, as it's David's first day at his new job, just want to wish you every success during today, David.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing you on the other side of your teaching today.
Perfect.
And keep on smiling.
I'm off to class right now. I got to go get ready. So thanks again, everybody, and thank you, Stephen. Bridgetti.
Have a great one, David. Take care.
Okay. So it's goodbye from us. Take care, everybody. We'll see you again soon. Bye.
Bye.